WGPR Detroit HD2.
You're watching WHPS, Highland Park, Detroit. The views and opinions expressed on the following show are not necessarily the views and opinions of WHPS, its affiliates, management, or sponsors.
Good afternoon. Welcome. We are going to talk a little bit about millennials, and we want to address the issues that my very special guest, Miss English Reed Jones, is going to discuss about millennials versus everybody. But she's today along with Pastor Velma Jean Overman, who is the director of Operation Refuge in the magnificent city of Inkster, under the auspices of the Honorable Mayor Patrick Wembley. And we want to make certain that everybody tunes in and listens to my special guests today that are going to be talking about millennials and some of the issues that millennials are having in today's society, especially when it comes down to being some of the potential leaders in the metropolitan Detroit area. Today is a very, very valued day because we have a lot of millennials that want to get their expressions across to everyone. And when we get started, what I'd like to do is I'd like to introduce Pastor Velma Jean Overman and Miss English Reed Jones to talk about some of the issues that English has been expressing on a Facebook page, which is what kind of made the directive of our conversation today. So to get started, I'm going to first say my first special guest, very special guest. I can't say the word very enough, but my first very special guest is Miss English Reed Jones, and she is the executive director of Millennials versus Everybody. Miss Jones, welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me. So honored to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you on as well. And then also Pastor Velma Jean Overman, who is the director of Operation Refuge. And she can tell you a little bit about Operation Refuge and some of the magnificent things that they're doing for the citizens of Inkster and surrounding cities. Pastor Overman, thank you for being on the show with us today.
Oh, thank you so much. Good afternoon to everyone. It is truly an honor to be here today to speak on behalf of millennials for nonprofits and to share some brief information regarding
Pastor,
Operation
we welcome you to the
Refuge.
show today. I don't know if you can get a chance to hear me, but she is the director of Operation Refuge, and they have a variety of different things that they do in the city of Inkster. And one of the things that they do is they have a food pantry that they give away food and other items. They even give away clothing, they give away toiletries, and they also do one other thing that's been very valued in the community. They also provide HIV testing, as well as provide the testing for the COVID-19. But Pastor Overman, can you hear me now?
Yes, I could hear you.
Pastor,
All
make sure that your mic
you
is
guys ready for
not
me
muted.
to speak? Can you hear me clearly? So, are you able to hear me? Because
Okay.
in this
Well, let's get
virtual
started
world-
then. If we can't hear Pastor, let's get started then with Miss English. Miss English, let me ask you first. How does it feel to be a millennial in the city of Detroit?
Wow, way to go ahead and just open it up. Well, my name is English with an I. I'm the founder of Millennials versus Everybody. We are a membership-based social enterprise that empowers and equips millennials with intellectual tools, professional resources, and civic engagement opportunities. I started this social enterprise because I recognized, as being a millennial in Detroit, I still wanted to be engaged in opportunities that were gonna empower me as a young person here. Being a millennial in Detroit, sometimes I feel as though I am not always appreciated in certain spaces. Some spaces I am appreciated, but it is honestly sometimes difficult to find jobs here, to find opportunity and leadership in Detroit. But I really love Detroit. I love my hometown. I love our city. I love our people. I really appreciate our hustle here in Detroit. But it is definitely a space as a Black professional where I feel like I can have more opportunity. But one thing that one of my mentors was telling me was just to make sure that I continue to put myself in spaces where when I walk in the room, people's eyes light up. And so I have found some of those spaces here in Detroit. I would like to have much more, but I feel loved in certain instances, and others I feel unappreciated and unheard.
Now, millennials versus everyone. How did that concept come about? And then also, too, English, if you can talk about who are the millennials? Because, you hear a lot of different terminology from Generation Xers to millennials, baby boomers. Who are the millennials?
So millennials, you're going to find them kind of around the age of 25, 26 to 38, 39. That is going to be the millennial generation. So we are out of college, we're a couple of years out of college. Some of us are in the area of having families, starting families, and yeah, I'm the youngest. I'm kind of in the youngest age range of millennials. But we are diverse beings. We were able to be around during like the CD era, barely seeing computers in our homes, only to being at school, to now we see laptops everywhere. No one uses computers anymore. A lot of us are familiar with dial-up and AOL and chats of that nature, and the phone even before the flip phone. So I feel like our generation has a very wide range of being around when technology was still very new to like now being able to see where it's at right now. So that's really how you can kind of describe us.
It's so interesting, English, just having this conversation. It just makes me tend to think about how things were, like you said, back in my day, and in hearing how you use a lot of the terminology and the phrases that millennials use. And I think that myself, in my age group, I'm learning a lot from millennials, because every time I turn around, there's a new catchphrase, there's a new acronym, when it comes down to, like, with us, we had yearbooks, and in our yearbooks, we had phrases like sealed with a kiss, SWAK, whereas now millennials have a lot of different phrases now that it's hard to really keep track of all the different acronyms now that millennials use. But basically, let's kind of get started, and I hope that we can get Pastor on, shortly. But basically, let's talk about, what do you think and how do you believe that the school systems play a role in how millennials feel today?
Sure. So I actually had a friend who was sharing this as someone who grew up in Detroit. He was just saying, there's like this notion of, either you go to Casa Renaissance or you try to get an address to go to school further out in the suburbs. There's this thing of you wanting to get out of Detroit, that Detroit isn't a place where sometimes you feel supported, or like where you feel like you have to seek outside of the city or outside of the community in order to find success. And so some people feel like, okay, well, if that's the case, then they want to, if that's the case, they seek like, oh, you know, I must go outside of the city in order to have jobs or opportunity or have better school systems. And so if people don't feel supported or like the city is somewhere that they want to be when they're younger, that can be very difficult for them to want to stay in the city and to grow in the city and to raise their children in the city if there's kind of that notion. And then you'll see like other people who are coming from the suburbs to come downtown to work and to like live the lifestyle, but then go back because maybe taxes aren't as high or car insurance isn't as high. So if you have young people not feeling like, you know, they can get adequate schooling outside of 2 schools and have to leave the schools, then that causes for problems. And especially like when you have creatives, or, you know, Detroit, we have the Motown, right? The car systems, you know, just very like a lot of grit and a lot of hustle. But I think when school systems are shutting down and after school programs or musical programs or things like this that really pull to the creative of young people, when those things are gone, then, you know, when you're 18, you kind of have this idea where I'm ready to go, you know, I'm ready to get out of here. And so I think, you know, having that mindset, like when you're young, that can definitely be an issue. And me personally, I went to private schools when I was in Detroit. And then my family moved to the suburbs. And so I too have this kind of view of like, okay, school systems in Detroit aren't that great. And when I was here, I went to private schools, and then I went to the suburbs. And so I even had like friends and stuff who were in the suburbs, and their family was moving out to the suburbs to get their children a better education. So when you have that mindset and you see that, and you're already from the high school age trying to escape Detroit, then I think it causes problems with people wanting to give back to Detroit and to grow their family here.
Because I think that, you know, when you look at, like you mentioned about the 2 schools, you know, and a lot of times you have companies that are looking to hire people. And how does it feel if you went to a school other than the 2 that you mentioned, and you're putting your high school education on there? And does that also affect when millennials may be interested in going to college and to apply at the different colleges, as to if you put down another school other than the 2 that you mentioned? Do you feel like those schools are giving you a fair shake when it comes down to enrolling you or admitting you into those schools?
I'm not sure. I'm not in college admissions, but I do know that colleges look at, really, they pretty much look at grades, like from what I'm hip to, and your extracurriculum activities. I don't necessarily know that colleges know the history of Detroit or which schools are the best schools. I'm sure some admissions people know about, you know, Cass and Renaissance, but there are people who go to schools all around high schools. As long as you have, I feel like that grade point average in those extra school curriculums, or you're applying to the right scholarships, then you have the ability to go to whatever high school. I think what's more important to focus on and to think about are the actual advisors within inside of the high schools, right? Though that's where the question should, I feel like, focus on, are the advisors that's inside of the high school, how are they equipping and preparing students to now take it to the next level? Are they using encouraging words? Because you often hear the story about advisors not really being as encouraging. Like I went to an event last year with Big Sean, and he was talking about like how his high school advisor, one of his teachers, you know, were very discouraging to him. And I've heard people share this story before, so I don't think it's necessarily about the college admissions, because most schools, they're pretty much looking for you to have a good essay and like all these other things, but it's the preparation that comes beforehand.
Well, the preparation is a real valued part because of the fact that if you're taking an SAT or an ACT test,
Right.
and you don't do well on that test, then that could really affect, where you're going to,
Facts.
places that you may want to enroll into college. But the other thing too is that when you are looking at the various different schools, where some people like to stay here versus would like to go elsewhere, to the HBCUs,
Yeah.
to the Ivy League schools and places like that. And then also too, I think when you mentioned about with the advisors need to really kind of hone in on what the person wants to really do. Are they interested in being an engineer?
Right.
And then allow them to take courses that could lead into the engineering field. As an engineer, you're looking at someone who has a lot of math
Yeah.
in their background. Or if somebody wants to be a doctor, then they need to take the chemistries and the biology classes, So, and then also too, now you have a background in communications, is that correct? What is your ideal? And then let's kind of go into a little bit about the millennials for, as far as say for profit that you and Pastor Overman and others were trying to work out. But what was your mindset when you went to high school that you wanted to do when you graduated and then went on to higher learning? What did you want to do?
In high school, 17-year-old, 18-year-old, I really didn't know, right? And I feel like there is this expectation for a 17 or 18-year-old to know what they should do with the rest of their lives. And I feel like that's a little crazy, but for me, I really didn't know. I knew that I wanted to go to school. I had someone like helping support me with like applying to different colleges because I'm a first generation like college student from like my mom. So I got support in that, and some people were leaning into like trying to lean me into education and things like that, but I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. I thought I kind of knew what communication was, like as far as like communicating with people and things like that. And so once I got to campus and I started to learn more, then I was like, oh, communication seems like something I would be passionate in. And I got my degree in communication with a focus in advocacy and an emphasis in social service. So I always knew like I like impact work, social justice work. And so that's what I studied. But I think what would be helpful in high schools are to have more mentoring programs or people coming to share their stories, or like, back in the day, I feel like, I don't know if this was like in middle school, but like it was like bring your parent to school day, and like they would talk about the careers and like different stuff that they have, just to expose us a little bit more about what's out there and what are the possibilities, and then like what are the tracks that you need to take in order to have the career that you want. But some of us just like, we don't know, what we want to do. And so I went to school undecided, and then I just focused on taking my prereqs, and then I started to learn more about other programs and degrees and learning about myself more and what my passions were and how I felt I could show up in the world. And so that's kind of how I landed on a BAC.
And that's so interesting when you mentioned that about coming to school, and we used to have things like career days,
Right.
where we would have people to come into the schools and actually talk about their profession. And then we had folks that, were proud. Their moms and dads would come in, or their grandparents or uncles and aunts would come in. And that really influenced a lot of the, young people in the schools, especially when you talk about the elementary and the middle school, schoolers. But I think that we have Pastor now. Is she on the air with us? So Pastor, if you can hear the sound of my voice, Pastor Velma Jean Overman, the director of Operation Refuge. Welcome to the show today with myself and Miss English Reed Jones.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We can hear you now.
Yay!
Yay! I could hear you, but of course we were having a little technical difficulty, which goes with this new world we're living in, right? But
Well, that's why we
thank
need more
you.
millennials to probably be able to address those things. So they, and that's so funny that, you mention that, because usually when something happens to like laptops, cell phones, even video games, we usually give them to the millennials and they whip them up, get them back running just like that. So now here we've got you on. Let's talk a little bit about how the concept came about. I was asking English a little bit about the Millennials for Profits, but can you kind of expound a little bit more about the Millennials for Profits?
Yeah, I'll go back and just share a little bit about our summary. So I met English, who, as you can see and hear, is an amazing young woman in the city of Detroit at one of their chamber events at the Soundboard. And we were talking about the possibilities of what it would look like to have a relationship accelerator program where you are very intentional about the work you do. And she loves millennials. She brings purpose and value and structure. I said, it sounds like a great idea. Let's do it. So, of course, we filed and she made it happen where we received a grant from COAC and we were able to partner with those like Early Works and to really bring this work into fruition. We've been doing a lot. We have great participation. And there's a conversation happening with our millennials about the value that they feel as though they're receiving in the city. So after her Facebook page kind of blew up with comments, we thought, let's really hear what the city of Detroit has to say. And when you think about the population of millennials is 25% of your city. So if your young people have more to bring to the table, we certainly want to get them there with it. So it is a relationship accelerator, bringing together nonprofits and the boardroom where the decisions are made and all the millions of dollars are funneled through, and to make sure that the millennial presence, their hand, their blueprint, and their voices are included. So that's kind of some of the shake up to get you started with this.
So who are some of the other participating partners with the Millennials for Nonprofits?
We can't hear you, Pastor.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Now we can.
Now
So you can now. So
Yes.
we had quite a few partners. We actually started in July, and we had like a cohort of individuals that came together, and we kind of identified the 5 groups we would work with. So we had young people from Revive Detroit, we had community development, we had Living Brave through breast cancer, the Western Wayne County NAACP, University of Michigan, as well as Operation Refuge. So we have quite a few partners that are working with us to make sure that we're off the ground and running and actually getting the program kind of solidified and getting it to scale so that it can grow, strengthen, and be prototype for others.
So now, aside from this action step, what are some of the other action steps that Millennials for Profits are doing?
Well, I'm sorry, English, you go ahead and share.
Yeah, I want you. It's Millennials for Nonprofits.
I'm sorry, nonprofits. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Pastor.
Oh, no, you, because the one thing that I really want to make sure is that when you talk about bringing this sort of scalable change to the city of Detroit, you really want to hear from your young people. You want to hear from our millennials, and I know we could have that little Gen Y thing going, but they're the voice that comes with things that we haven't thought about. And as you alluded to earlier, Mr. Griffin, when something's broken, needs to be fixed, needs to be thought of in a different perspective, then you want to get your millennials or your grandchildren out there to make things happen. So please share, English, some of the findings that you have, some of the things that you've gleaned from the millennials.
Sure.
And I really want us not to forget about Facebook in that conversation also.
Yeah, of course. So, Pastor Jean, thank you so much for being here and even sponsoring this opportunity for us to talk and to be here. Pastor Jean is literally the definition of generational like community working together. She saw me as a young person at the Detroit Policy Conference. She heard me talk about millennials versus everybody and just my passion and my tenacity, and she saw me as someone that deserved to have a seat at the table. She saw me as a young person that she wanted to pour into and help get to the next level. And if we don't have relationships with our older generations or people of wisdom who's been there and done that, then we really can't get to where we want to be without that proper passing of baton or unity. So I just really want to give a heartfelt thank you to Pastor Jean. Like, she's really amazing. I look at her like a second mom who just really wants to see me thrive. And so we came together and said, what if more people had relationships like us? Like, what if there were more people who valued millennials and supported them with getting to the next level? How great the world would be. And so we started Millennials for Nonprofits, which is a relationship accelerator that takes, energized millennials who are looking to support nonprofits and nonprofits that are looking to expand their leadership board to be more generationally inclusive. And so pretty much what Millennials for Nonprofit does is it creates a pipeline for leadership and reciprocal relationships. So it's not just pulling on millennials to do the social media work, but to say, how can we get you a seat at the board table? How can we value your ideas? How do we allow your innovative methods to be integrated into what we're doing, right? Because we are the next generation of leaders. And so how do we now provide that pipeline for you guys to have a seat at the leadership table? And a really good example of that is one of our partners from Western Wayne County was there, and she's 100% open. She's older, and she was saying, I don't want to necessarily be president forever. Like, there's going to be a point where I want to take the back seat, and I want to be able to groom and funnel someone else into leadership. And so one of the millennial participants from our program, what I did was I seen, okay, what are millennials' passions? What are some of the skill sets that they have? And I really asked them, where do they want to go? And so one of our participants, he wants to get into politics and economic development. And so he matched with Western Wayne County NAACP. And so now he sits on their economic sustainability committee. And so he's now learning the skills that are going to help him on his resume and help him, get more suited for politics, while then again pouring in innovative ideas and methods to Western Wayne County NAACP. So it's a very reciprocal relationship and a pipeline for leadership, which I think is brilliant and very strong. And so what we do is we provide training for the millennials to be able to articulate their gifts and skills that go past their resume, but then also teach the nonprofits on inclusive leadership. Like, what does that look like? And how can we create spaces where there is an opportunity for more millennial leadership? If you look at a lot of nonprofit boards, there's not a lot of race diversity, but for sure not a lot of age diversity. And we have to start thinking about, okay, well, when it's time to transition, how have we supported the next generation to come on here to keep up the good work? And so it's something that we have to be more aware of. And I think, Pastor Jean being able to see that and understand too that young voices are very important to the movement, and we really do have a collective mission here, right? We, in one way or other, want to see more justice in our community. We want to see our community thrive, right? And so how do we do that? And so Pastor Overman, she experienced, she got to see firsthand too, even with coming up with this great idea, co-coming up with this and her supporting me, take this accelerator to the next level, even in the grant process. And once we got the funding, how I was treated as a millennial, and whether the organization meant to or not, it was just very clear that my intellectual property of coming up with this idea, my hard work and my dedication wasn't as valued as the people who were helping us, reform this program even more, right? And I appreciate Early Works for all the work that they've done. We wouldn't be able to do the things that we did without Key and without their support. But even when it comes to operational dollars, as me being the person that sat here, wrote this grant, come up with these ideas, and then there's still no operational dollars to me as the millennial, but we can give all the dollars to the supporting partner, that really hurt my feelings. And then the times like where I wanted to speak up on it, I didn't feel like I was valued to have that space. And so I was advocated by Pastor Jean. I was advocated by Early Work. So I see that there are people who are in my corner that also see like, wow, like, you should be more respected for your intellectual property. And there's just experiences that I've gone through that I've talked to my friends about where they feel like we're not valued, or we may not be able to find good paying jobs that's going to pay us over $60K and that's going to really recognize our innovative ideas and the things that we have to bring toward the leadership table. And so I end up making a Facebook post after a series of events that I've experienced, and I knew that it was going to be controversial. I felt like, because I had a little stomach drop before I even made it, and the post said that Black millennial talent is not appreciated in Detroit. And I mean, it kind of sort of went viral, and I had a lot of people that had feedback on it, a lot of people that said things about it. And so I know that Pastor Jean wants us to kind of cover that.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back with Pastor Velma Jean Overman, as well as with English Reed Jones. So again, welcome to Operation Refuge, to Millennials versus Everyone, and to Millennials for Nonprofits. Thank you, and we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
We're seeing more patients admitted with severe disease. It's heartbreaking for me to have to turn to my patient in the bed and to say, you need to make that phone call because we're putting you on life support.
Anytime you lose a patient, it's devastating. And when you have to tell a family member that they've lost a loved one and they haven't been able to be there, it's just brutal. You just don't recover from that. Nobody recovers from that.
In order to keep Michigan safe, it's so important to get vaccinated.
To be able to meet people from different countries enriches our lives.
Wayne County gave me so much, my degree, who I am.
The college supports you to grow. They have the different campuses. I'm like, I can try this. Makrit Shonga, Ethiopia.
Sandra Gonzalez, Mexico.
Arminalda Carrick, Bosnia.
Javed Khan, Bangladesh. Go to Wayne County. They will find your path and you will know what to do next.
We at Watkins Broadcasting care about the health and safety of our viewers and listeners. During this novel coronavirus pandemic, please protect yourself and others. Wash your hands well and often. Avoid touching your face. Cough and sneeze into your sleeve. Practice social distancing. Stay at least 6 feet away from others when in public, and only leave the house when it's essential. Stay safe. You are important to us.
With my special guest today, Miss English Reed Jones, as well as Pastor Velma Jean Overman. And we're having a conversation today talking about Millennials for Nonprofits. And before we went to break, we were, talking a little bit about some of the struggles that some of the millennials are having when it comes down to being appreciated. And what English did was she put a Facebook page, on her Facebook page, she put a post out. And she was talking about that, and she just about blew Facebook up with all of the comments that people were, making pertaining to their concerns about millennials for profit, nonprofits rather. And one of the things that I just wanted to read, one of the comments in English, and I know, Pastor, you've got some other comments that you were saying from the page too, is that Nicole Smalls had wrote a comment and said that it's because it's an old guard city that millennials fail to take power because there aren't enough to stick together and activate political power. Most try to seek mentorship from the members of the old guard, and these people won't let go of the old rugged cross to save their life, let alone pass the baton. And I'll throw that out, so that if English you wanted to comment, pertaining to that, and I know you did in the Facebook page, but if you want to comment on that, I'll allow you to comment on that, and then we'll go to you and then go to our pastor with other comments that people made.
Yeah, sure. I actually just talked to a friend about this who said that he and his mentor were invited to a special Black Caucus Award dinner, and there was someone there who is a big CEO, a billionaire, millionaire, something like that, who he had wanted to meet. And his mentor has way more money than him, much further in his career. And he said when they got to the event, his mentor acted like he didn't know him. And what's crazy is a couple of years later, they actually work in the same building, a couple of doors down. And obviously he's no longer his mentor. And he was just very confused as to why he acted like that. And there was actually someone else in the room that my friend knew who still connected him to the person that he needed to. And actually his mentor had to wait to talk to him. And, it's very unfortunate that people hear these stories where it's he did not feel like his competition at all. And for him to be his mentor, and then they get flown out to DC, and for him to ignore him hurted him very much. And to be honest, Pastor Jean, she didn't even know me, and she's probably one of the first people who really took it upon herself to be very serious and make it her business to help put me in positions to get to the next level. And I see sometimes in spaces there are no young people in leadership there. And that's, it may be, maybe leadership is not ready to transition, that's fine. But I will say that there must be more mentorship. I see a lot of times, whether it be baby boomers or other people who have a lot of smack to talk about millennials or a lot of things to talk down upon, which hopefully we can shuffle this into the comment that Jean wants to read, about saying oh, well, millennials don't have skills, or they're this or they're that, and they have not ever walked up to a millennial and tried to teach them something, or pass them a baton, or teach them a skill, or start a program to support them, or do anything to really listen to them. All they've done is say negative things. And I don't want to paint that picture as if that's everyone, because that's definitely not. I have people of wisdom in my life who truly want to see me thrive and who believe in me and see me as the future. But that's sometimes the case. I mean, we can look at a lot of leadership, and there are a lot of people who are older there. And, the question is okay, well, is there a plan to make space for younger people? Is there a plan for more mentorship to ensure that when it's time to shift leadership, that we are prepared, that we do feel like we have a seat at the table, right? I don't want it to make it seem like that's a blanket statement, but unfortunately, these are testimonies that we do hear.
Now, Pastor, did you have a comment that you wanted to make from one of the comments that was put on English's page?
Yes, one of the Facebook comments, and I'm going to read it. It's actually
Pastor,
from
can you hear
a
us?
close. Can you hear me?
She can.
I'm.
Okay.
Can you hear me
English,
now?
did you have a comment from one of the other comments that was made that you'd like to address?
Yeah, sure. So the one that Pastor was going to address is from a guy named Lamar, and to my understanding, he works with the state representatives. And there's one comment that he made, state senator. Yeah. And he made a comment, who trained these talented millennials and what are their talents? And then he dropped a emoji like sips tea. And that might be a millennial thing, but when you sip tea, that's pretty much like giving shade. Like, sips my tea, like almost like, you know, coming on the thing to be like, oh, really? Like, y'all exist? Where y'all at? And what is it? You know, type of thing. And so, to our defense, Pastor shared, she goes, this should be your priority, my brother. If not, make it yours. You can't represent them in Lansing/Detroit and not know who they are and who is doing the training and ensuring the training is what's needed to provide excellence in our communities. And so I think that speaks to the other comment, like, you are making a post to say who trained these millennials and what are their talents versus saying, how can we come together to create a training program? How can we come together? Or how can I better identify these millennials? You don't make that comment and then drop a shade emoji. You understand? So that's the very energy that the comment you spoke about, Darwin, that we're speaking to, right? And the question is, how many millennials does he work with? You know what I'm saying? I wonder what is the community that they have, because that was a very like shady comment to make instead of figuring out how can we uplift these voices, right? How can we now provide opportunities? And through Millennials for Nonprofits, we do provide training for millennials. We do provide trainings for nonprofits or even for any type of board or leadership that wants to diversify their audience, you know? And I think oftentimes it may not be that, you know, older leadership doesn't want to connect with us. They may just not know how, right? They may not know what language to use or how to relate to us. And there's some millennials that aren't comfortable being in these leadership positions when no one there looks like them, or when their ideas are shut down, or when they're double crossed because they're a certain age, right? And so there has to be training on their behalf on what inclusive leadership even looks like, right? How do you diversify your board? You know, what is diversity and inclusion looking like on a race and age level, right? And so it's those comments right there and that type of attitude that your comment was speaking to, that has to be addressed. And that can't be the tone, that can't be the attitude, and that can't be the approach if the goal is to really have unity within our generations, right? Because at the end of the day, we need each other. And at the end of the day, leadership has to transition at some point. And I want him to be able to ask himself, have I done everything that I can to ensure that the millennial generation has more strengths? Have I done everything that I can to ensure that when they do transfer into these leadership positions, I've given them everything that I can to make sure that they can do the job the best that they can? Have I done everything in my power to give back to this generation? And he probably would say no, because according to him, he doesn't know anyone, and he hasn't even made it his priority to seek out these millennials or to help millennials who may not have these talents. And there's so many of us that do, but we're just not connected. So I don't think that that was the question he should have been asking. And I felt like adding that shade comment was childish.
Well, let me ask this question too, English.
Sure.
So when you look in terms of, say, at the CEOs or the presidents of organizations that may be listening to this broadcast, what is it that you would say? Because you mentioned earlier in your comments that there's training that you would give to or provide to millennials. What is the type of training that you provide to the millennials so that they would be better groomed, better prepared to be able to go and meet the needs of some of these organizations?
Sure. You asked two questions there. So specifically for Millennials for Nonprofits, we will be talking more about like board etiquette. How do you articulate your skills? Because sometimes people think like what's on their resume is all that they have, when in reality they might be good at conflict resolution, right? They might have been the older sister or the older brother that's been able to bring peace into their family, right? So it's just about articulating their gifts. And when you're new to being on like a leadership board, like in a nonprofit board, it's more so pertaining to that, and knowing the needs of like whatever nonprofit you might be working with. How can you now bring like a parallel to your skills and your gifts and really look beyond just what's on your resume to tend to that, right? But I do want to share with you something where I was talking to a friend, and I just kind of want to be able to read their experience. So from their perspective, they share there is an extreme gap in opportunities for millennials. When we are children, we are often poured into because there's so many resources for youth at risk in communities, but then you turn 18. You graduate high school, or maybe you didn't, or you're trying to go back and see what's available to you. And you have high taxes because you live in the city proper. You have ridiculous car insurance. You aren't being taken seriously because you're young. And there's a generation holding down so many jobs, but they will not let you access that space. They will not listen to you and your innovative ideas. They will not pay for a livable wage. Apartments downtown Detroit are over $1,000 a month for a studio. You're being told if you don't have a car, you don't have reliable transportation, yet we're being offered to work between $11 and $15 an hour, but you live in the city proper. What do you do after local tax? And all of those who live outside the city but work here have to pay half of the income tax locally as you do, and they're older, and they have spouse to support them, and that's not necessarily the experience of our elders. But in the city of Detroit growing up into the pandemic, we saw many workplaces being inaccessible for young people because they're competing with older Detroiters who have children to feed for jobs. And these just aren't high-level office jobs that move like that. I'm talking about applying at work at McDonald's, community grocery stores. An employer is going to choose an older person who needs to feed their kids over a younger person. I saw an increase in young people able to access workplaces during the pandemic when older people were literally afraid to risk their health in working in those spaces. Young folks heavily are forced to work multiple jobs. So many of us identify as hustlers because it's the energy of the city, but a hustle spirit is not built in abundance. It's built because of grit and extreme need, which also creates a feeling of scarcity that makes people afraid to support one another because they feel like it'll close a door. But sometimes it's also not seen as a plus. Us having multiple jobs sometimes is seen like we aren't focused, but we have to do that to afford to be here. I can 100% relate to that. Like, side note, and so many of us get blocked out unless we have advanced degrees, but we have experience. We understand our communities innately. Some of us have local education. There's also a lack of incentive. The city is one of the few cities in Michigan with local tax. The city right now is incentivizing people from out the community to move here, but there are locals who are being blocked from opportunities and that have been given historically. Many Detroit millennials can get paid times over to work remote outside of Detroit or move to another city with more resources. One of the call to actions to answer your question, Darwin, organizations need to be intentional about creating pipelines, right? Which is something that Millennials for Nonprofits does as well. There's not only a lack of age diversity on so many organization staffs, but professional development and mentorship opportunities must be expanded. Millennials for Nonprofits, again, we are creating those pipelines. And this is just a quick testimony from a friend of mine. And I'm going to talk in first person as if I'm talking for them, okay? I grew up in Detroit. I got my bachelor's, got my master's degree. I haven't lived in this city for a decade, but I love it. I want to buy a house and settle here. That's my dream. Have worked in the field post-grad for 3 years now. I moved back here. I couldn't find work in the city of Detroit that would pay my bills. Do you hear that? Very real, right? I'm working remote for a company that is located in DC. I'm making over $60K in salary. I have great benefits. I can't even propose that in the city. right? Older employees would laugh at me, but I know that I deserve that. I deserve to make a livable wage, especially if the city is going to take 2.45% of my income tax. And I couldn't have lived outside of the city, but this is my home. I did not grow up in Metro Detroit. I am a Detroiter, and I deserve to be able to afford to live here just as much as the transplants who've moved to the community I now live in. Locals do not live here. They drive people around in Ubers here. They bring them their food. They repair their homes, but they do not live here. And I talk to so many young Detroiters who just moved because they are tired of fighting and not being respected, because they know their worth, because they want to be able to afford the kind of life they deserve and grind for. That makes me so sad.
Well, we've only got about 5 more minutes left, and I want to bring Pastor back on to make some closing comments. Pastor.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Oh, good. So when I think about everything that I was able to hear, and I'm very thankful I was able to engage, when I think about this and what we can do with being very intentional, we will reap rewards that we had no idea were available. When we initially had this conversation with our millennials and the nonprofits, some of the language they used is changing the game in our community together. Mm-hmm. They appreciate reciprocity. They want to live in equity and fairness. They want us to be intentional about our action plans, being inclusive. They want to be a part of a learning community, sharing their knowledge and everything they bring to the table. They are willing to adapt and to change. They really want our collective best. They're looking for great mentors. They are willing to accept the differences in the generations. They simply want representation. They want the exposure. They want us to understand that they're very vulnerable and to be there for them. So when you look at English as an example of the amazing young people that are the generation, I want to do everything I can with Operation Refuge, with so many other organizations that I sit on the board with. I'm always looking for the millennials at the table. So anything that the listening audience can do, we want you to be a part of this, to reach out to me. I'm reaching out to some of the leadership at the United Way and some of the organizations that have funding strings in the city of Detroit, that we become very intentional with our support and we get behind this young lady and do this work. Again, thank you, Mr. Griffin, for being a moderator today, being very supportive.
Thank you.
Thank you for Early Works and the work they've done, COAC, and so many others. We're thankful for that support, but we clearly need more.
Well, listening to both you and to English, it's obvious that we need to make certain that the people that hear this broadcast, that see this broadcast, understand that there is a changing of the guard. Mm-hmm. And what we have to do is to guard the change. We have to protect the change. We have to encourage the change. We have to uplift the change. And we have to make certain, because as everybody knows, the old adage, it takes a village. And we in this village have to be able to unify and unite and do things collectively. And if we can't, then we're not going to succeed. And the legacy, as I was saying to English, as I was saying to all of the other millennials, the legacy is being left in some great, great hands. But we have to appreciate it, and we have to let them know that we do appreciate it and do whatever we can do to help support them so that the legacy will continue to move on and live on in their children and their grandchildren as well. Mm-hmm. English, I'll let you make the last final comment, and then we've got probably about 1 minute left to kind of wrap up.
Wow, I want to say thank you so much to Pastor Jean Overman for allowing this space for our voices to be heard. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin, for bringing me here and allowing me to join you in this space to share how we feel as well. I believe Detroit is a phenomenal city. I want our talent to stay here, to be appreciated, to have livable wages, and for our hustle mentality to not be out of scarcity, right? But for us to be able to live here and to be here in abundance, because Detroit is a great city, and we will truly, truly, truly thrive in the way that we want to thrive, and even beyond our greatest measures, if we do appreciate millennials and we create greater pipelines for them into leadership. So thank you so much for everyone that's listening, and I hope that you connect with Millennials for Nonprofits. You guys can email me at englishishrj@gmail.com. We have a Millennials for Nonprofits Google site. I have millennialsversuseverybody.com. Feel free to connect with us. We really do want to change the trajectory in the city. Thank you guys so much.
Well, you know, it's obvious listening to your communication skills. We have some great millennials that can really communicate very, very effectively. And it's not just when it comes down to the communication, because there's verbal and then there's nonverbal communication. And you do both very, very effectively. So some of the CEOs, some of the presidents of organizations and companies need to really, really take heed in what was being disseminated out today. I want to thank Pastor Velma Jean Overman for her astute and very, very, very passionate comments that she made when it comes down to the insight that she had after she met English, and how she took that baton and she's trying to go and keep English and other millennials here in Detroit instead of them having to leave and go elsewhere. The talent base is here. Recognize it, reinvigorate it, and rejuvenate it. Value it. It is a very, very, very wise investment that English is making on the city of Detroit, that Pastor Overman is making. Myself and others are trying to get people, because you get a very good return on your investment.
Absolutely.
Take heed. All of the CEOs, all of the presidents, all of the executive directors of organizations. But my special guest today, and I do thank you for allowing me the opportunity to go and, moderate this discussion. I hope that we can have a second and a third. But right now, we just want to make certain that everybody realizes now is the time to take heed. Again, thank you to English Reed Jones. Thank you to Pastor Velma Jean Overman. And we hope that everybody will go on that website and find Millennials for Nonprofits. Thank you again.
Thank you.
To Operation Refuge, and thank you to Millennials versus Everybody. My name is Darwin Griffin. Have a great rest of this afternoon.